Before I call the Prime Minister, I am sure the House will wish to reflect for a moment on the fact that this is a solemn day which marks the first anniversary of the terrorist attack on Israel, with dozens of hostages still in captivity. The conflict has claimed thousands of innocent civilian lives. Today is a day when we should come together to remember those, all of those who have been affected. I now call the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we mark a year since the horrific attack on Israel by the terrorists of Hamas. It was the bloodiest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust, a day of sorrow, a day of grief. Over 1,000 people were massacred, hundreds taken hostage, in an attack born of hatred, targeted not just at individuals, but at Jewish communities, at their way of life, and at the State of Israel, the symbol of Jewish security to the world. Mr. Speaker, 15 British citizens were brutally slain that day. Another has since died in captivity. Our thoughts today are with the Jewish people around the world, the Jewish community here in the United Kingdom, and all those that we lost a year ago. For so many, the pain and horror of that day is as acute today as it was a year ago. They live it every day. Last week, I met the families of British hostages and those killed on the 7th of October. I sat with them as they told me about their loved ones. I will never forget their words. Mandy Damari spoke of her love for her daughter Emily. She said, and I quote, "My personal clock stopped at 10:24 on the 7th of October, the moment when Emily sent a desperate, unfinished message as Hamas attacked her kibbutz. She is still held captive today." We can hardly imagine what hostages like Emily are going through, nor what the families are going through. The agony, day after day. So I say again, the hostages must be returned immediately and unconditionally. They will always be uppermost in our minds. And I pay tribute again to the families for their incredible dignity and determination. Mr. Speaker, today is also a day of grief for the wider region as we look back on a year of conflict and suffering. The human toll amongst innocent civilians in Gaza is truly devastating. Over 41,000 Palestinians have been killed, tens of thousands orphaned, almost 2 million displaced, facing disease, starvation, desperation, without proper health care or shelter. It is a living nightmare, and it must end. We stand with all innocent victims in Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and beyond. And we stand with all communities here in the United Kingdom against hatred of Jews or Muslims. Because any attack on a minority is an attack on our proud values of tolerance and respect, and we will not stand for it. Mr. Speaker, with the Middle East close to the brink and the very real danger of a regional war, last week the Iranian regime chose to strike Israel. The whole House will join me in utterly condemning this attack. We support Israel's right to defend herself against Iran's aggression, in line with international law. Because let's be very clear, this was not a defensive action by Iran. It was an act of aggression and a major escalation in response to the death of a terrorist leader. It exposes once again Iran's malign role in the region. They helped equip Hamas for the 7th of October attacks. They armed Hezbollah. who launched a year-long barrage of rockets on northern Israel, forcing 60,000 Israelis to flee their homes. And they support the Houthis, who mount direct attacks on Israel and continue to attack international shipping. Mr. Speaker, the whole House, I know, will join me in thanking our brave servicemen and servicewomen who have shown their usual courage in countering this threat. But make no mistake, the region cannot endure another year of this. Civilians on all sides have suffered too much. All sides must now step back from the brink and find the courage of restraint. There is no military solution to these challenges, so we must renew our diplomatic efforts. And together with my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, I've had discussions with the leaders of Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, the G7 and the EU, and made the case at the United Nations for political solutions to end the fighting. In the weeks ahead, we will continue this work, focused on three areas. Firstly, Lebanon, where our immediate priority is the safety of British citizens. Our team is on the ground, helping to get people out. We've already brought over 430 people home on chartered flights, and we stand ready with additional evacuation efforts as necessary. And I say again, an important message to British citizens still in Lebanon: you must leave now. Mr. Speaker, we're also working to ease the humanitarian crisis in Lebanon. Last week, we provided £10 million of vital support, in addition to the £5 million we're already providing to UNICEF. But the situation cannot go on. We will continue to lead calls for an immediate ceasefire and the return to a political plan for Lebanon, based on Security Council Resolution 1701, which requires Hezbollah to withdraw north of the Litani River. They must stop firing rockets and end this now, so that people on both sides of the border can return to their homes. Second, Mr. Speaker, we must renew efforts for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. But we cannot simply wait for this to happen. We must do more now to provide relief to the civilian population. And that's why we've restarted aid to UNRWA. We're supporting field hospitals and the delivery of water, healthcare and treatment for malnourished children. But the ongoing restrictions on aid are impossible to justify. Israel must open more crossings and allow life-saving aid to flow. Crucially, they must provide a safe haven for aid workers. Too many have been killed, including 3 British citizens. Israel must act now, so that together with our allies, we can surge humanitarian support ahead of the winter. Third, Mr. Speaker, we must put in place solutions for the long term to break the relentless cycle of violence. The ultimate goal here is well understood. It must be the two-state solution. There is no other option which offers stability and security. So we need to build a political route towards it, so that Israel is finally safe and secure, alongside the long-promised Palestinian state. This requires support for the Palestinian Authority to step into the vacuum in Gaza. It requires an urgent international effort to support reconstruction, and it requires guarantees for Israel's security. We will work with our allies and partners to that end. But the key to all this remains a ceasefire in Gaza now. The unconditional release of the hostages, the unhindered flow of aid. That is the fundamental first step to change the trajectory of the region. Mr. Speaker, nobody in this House can truly imagine what it feels like to cower under the bodies of your friends, hoping a terrorist won't find you, mere minutes after dancing at a music festival. Nobody in this House can truly imagine seeing your city, your homes, your schools, your hospitals, your businesses obliterated, with your neighbours and family buried underneath. It is beyond our comprehension. And with that should come a humility. It is hard even to understand the full depth of this pain. But what we can do is remember. What we can do is respect and listen to the voices that reach out to us at these moments. And what we can do, Mr. Speaker, is use the power of diplomacy to try and find practical steps that minimise the suffering on the ground and work towards that long-term solution, so that a year of this terrible and bloody conflict can never happen again. That is what we've done on these benches. That is what the whole House has done. And it's what this government will continue to do. I commend this statement to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement? Today is the anniversary of October the 7th. This modern pogrom, the worst loss of life, Jewish life, since the Second World War, was a horrendous reminder of the anti-Semitism in our world and the existential threats that Israel faces. Over the last year, many of the hostages kidnapped by Hamas on the 7th of October have been raped, sexually abused, murdered, and mutilated beyond recognition. And today, a year on, many still remain held by Hamas and other terrorist groups. I think particularly today of the British citizen Emily Damari, who has endured a year in captivity. Across this House, I know that we join in saying, bring them home. The situation in the Middle East is grave. Too many innocent civilian lives have been lost. It is right that this country continues to play its part in defending Israel against Iranian attacks. But we should not forget the base cause of all these events: Iran's refusal to accept Israel's right to exist, and its desire to destabilize the region through arming and funding its terrorist proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. The current conflict in Lebanon is a result of Hezbollah's determination to use this territory to launch rocket attacks on Israel. And let me be clear, Israel has a right to defend itself. It has a right to eliminate the leadership of Hezbollah, and it has a right to restore security for its citizens. And this country should support Israel in pursuing these goals. But can the Prime Minister tell the House and expound on what he said about what role the United Kingdom is playing in providing humanitarian support to those Lebanese citizens who have been displaced because of this conflict? And I welcome, I think, his announcements on some financial support to that end. The medium-term question we must help address is what happens once the Israeli operation has finished. And can I ask the Prime Minister to update the House on what steps this country, along with our allies, are taking to help build up the capacity of the Lebanese state so that Hezbollah cannot simply re-establish itself in southern Lebanon? We must never forget that Hezbollah do not represent the interests of Lebanon or its citizens, but those of their paymasters in Tehran. Turning to the situation of British nationals in Lebanon, I know that the government has rightly been urging them to leave for some time now, but it is clear that difficulties in obtaining tickets on commercial flights mean a number of our citizens are still there. I welcome the government's chartering of planes to help British nationals return home, and know very well the logistical challenges involved in this, and pay tribute to all the Foreign Office and other teams that will be working hard to make sure that this happens. And can the Prime Minister assure the House that any British national who wishes to leave Lebanon will be able to do so on a government-chartered flight? And turning next to the Prime Minister's speech at the UN General Assembly, which he mentioned, can I fully endorse his reaffirmation that the United Kingdom will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes? Events in the Middle East and indeed Ukraine are another reminder that the world is increasingly becoming more dangerous. If we wish to be able to continue to deter our enemies, defend our values and stand up for our interests, then we will need to invest more in our military. Now, the Prime Minister and I have discussed previously my view that we should increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. But in our previous exchanges and in this House, he said a trajectory for future defence spending would be set out at the coming fiscal event. And could I just ask that he reconfirm his commitment to that timetable? And finally, on this sad anniversary, can I finish by saying that the United Kingdom stands with Israel against this terrorism today, tomorrow, and always. And to the Jewish community here in Britain, I know that at moments like this, when the Jewish people are under attack in their homeland, Jewish people everywhere can feel less safe. And I know that the Prime Minister will agree with me that across this House, we will always stand against the evils of anti-Semitism.
Minister.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his words, and I do think it's important on an occasion like this that we speak as with one voice across the House, and I think the whole House will agree with him when he says, in relation to the hostages, we must bring them home. They must be uppermost in our minds. He asks about the assistance in Lebanon. Humanitarian assistance is being provided, aid and money, also training, as he will know, and working towards the Security Council resolution. In relation to the evacuations, he asked about British nationals, and we will make sure that any British national does have the assistance they need to come home. And again, I repeat, now is the time to leave, and if any British national requires that assistance, please make contact with us so that we can provide that assistance. In relation to the 2.5% of defence spending, let me recommit to that we will increase it to 2.5%, and we'll set out our plans in due course. But the most important thing today, I think, is for this House to do it as it is doing, which is speak with one voice on the one-year anniversary of an awful terrorist attack. Thank you.
Chair of the Select Committee, Emily Thornbury.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On this anniversary, the House unites in its condemnation of the murder of over 1,000 Israeli citizens and makes a united call for the release of 100 hostages. Parliament also stands behind a belief in the rules-based international order, a belief that all civilian life is equal and must be protected. And so today we mark a year when more than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza, 742 people have been killed in the West Bank, and over 2,000 people have been killed in Lebanon. Will the Prime Minister confirm that all British actions in the Middle East will be guided by the principles of de-escalation, peace and diplomacy, and the protection of all civilian life?
I thank her for that question, and particularly her words about all civilian life being equal and protected. And I do confirm that everything we're doing is aimed at de-escalating across the region. It is on the brink, and I think it is important for all sides to pull back from the brink. And that's why we've been working so closely with our allies in the G7 on de-escalation, speaking with one voice. Thank you.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement? On the anniversary of those horrific attacks in Israel, we remember the victims, the people taken hostage and their families, and we stand with the whole Jewish community. Earlier this year, I visited Israel and Palestine and saw how both peoples were experiencing trauma. We must never forget the trauma of the hostages and their families. In Tel Aviv, I met Itzik Horn, a father still praying for his two sons, Yair and Eitan, to come home. So we must urge all actors to take the steps most likely to get the hostages home quickly and safely. The last year has seen terrible violence in the Middle East, a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and an appalling spike in hate crimes here in the UK. So, we must stand firm against anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. We must press for an immediate bilateral ceasefire to end the terrible cycle of violence and bring about lasting peace and security for both Israelis and Palestinians. And we must do all we can to prevent a regional war in the Middle East. UK forces rightly played their part in helping Israel neutralise Iran's outrageous attacks. Now I hope the government will try to convince Israel that keeping her citizens safe and secure is best achieved by restraint, not retaliation, and the risk of a regional war.